My wife cheated on me, and now everyone in town is dying. I barged through my front door and sprinted up the stairs. I made a run for the bedroom door before kicking it open. I know he's in here. God damn it. Where are you hiding him this time? I screamed. My wife, Susan, was shocked to see me back from work and was sitting in bed reading a book. I don't know what you are talking about, honey. I've been here all morning. I could tell from the red glow on my wife's cheeks and the beads of sweat rolling down her forehead that she was doing more than just reading a book. I know that scumbag is here. I can still smell his stinking aftershave. I grabbed the blankets and ripped them off the bed. Susan tried her best to cover her naked body. It's 2 in the afternoon. Why are you in bed naked? Susan looked like a rabbit caught in headlights. She stuttered as her brain tried to make up a plausible answer. I began tearing the room apart when suddenly I heard the sound of labored breathing coming from the closet. I felt a rage of red mist descend upon me before whipping open the closet doors. As I drove back to work, I couldn't get the image of Mason Bradley and his fat gut on top of my wife out of my mind. Intrusive thoughts about my wife's infidelities permeated my mind as I drove my truck. At 37, my life wasn't where I expected it to be. My dreams of running my own company were as broken as the beat-up pickup truck I used to drive to work. My truck rumbled up to the gates of the steel mill. The security guard at the gate barely acknowledged my existence as the truck roared past him. As I turned into the car park, I noticed my boss, Big Ed, waiting for me. As I got out of my truck, Big Ed came scurrying over. For a man who ran $1 million company, he always looked as if he was out panhandling for his next meal. His slacks were 2 sizes too big, and he wore the same t-shirt every day. "What are you doing tomorrow, Jack?" I hated how Big Ed spoke to me. He had a habit of spitting after every sentence, and would sometimes spit directly at me. I was going to surprise my wife tomorrow and take her somewhere nice. Big Ed hitched his slacks up onto his gut. "Listen here now, Jack. My car has been giving me some trouble, and I need you to service her." "Couldn't you get someone else to do it?" I could tell he was getting annoyed with my attitude. "If you want your job Monday, you will do what you're told." He had me over a barrel and knew I couldn't afford to lose the only job the town had to offer. "I'll be over first thing in the morning." I arrived at Ed's dilapidated mansion. Ed was outside with his car, swooning over her like she was some beautiful young woman. His face lit up as he ran his hands over the bonnet of the truck. "Be gentle with her. She's all I got," said Ed. Ed looked slightly smarter than his usual unkempt manner. "You got a date, Ed?" "When the cat's away, the mice will play," said Ed, giving me a mischievous wink. Ed pulled a red handkerchief from his back pocket and wiped the sweat from his forehead. "If I see one scratch on her, I will snap your neck." I was weary from a long day babysitting Ed's car. All I wanted to do was throw my feet up and have a nice cold beer. I stepped in my front door and was suddenly hit by a familiar smell. It smelled like Big Ed's nasty cologne, but I was too tired to take much notice. My body ached as I grabbed a beer from the kitchen before collapsing onto my chair. As I sat there, sipping beer and reevaluating my life's predicaments, I noticed something sticking out from the armrest of my couch. I walked over and picked up the red piece of cloth. The same red piece of cloth Big Ed used to wipe the beady sweat from his grubby forehead. I unfolded the cloth, and to my dismay, there was Ed's name embroidered on the hanky. I was heartbroken and furious. I knew what it meant, and all I wanted to do was tear the house down with my bare hands, but I knew better than to let my anger get the best of me. My eyes welled up as I sped down the country road. I turned the radio up full blast to drown out my intrusive thoughts. I was too embroiled in a battle with my conscience to notice the dark figure walking in the middle of the road. By the time I noticed, it was too late. I slammed on the brakes and covered my eyes before the car came to a halt. To my relief, I couldn't find any signs of someone injured. I convinced myself stress was making me go crazy. As I tried jumping back into my truck, I heard someone approaching from behind. "Having trouble, buddy?" I felt a cold chill up my spine. Something was telling me to run, but my legs had turned to jelly from fear. A dark figure stepped out from the shadows of the looming trees overhead. "I thought I had hit someone with my truck," I nervously explained. I couldn't make out who I was talking to. All I could see was an outline of a tall, dark figure. I hear you're having trouble with your wife. Do I know you? I nervously asked. Suddenly, the dark figure came into focus, revealing an old man. He took something from his pocket before handing it to me. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was Big Ed's red handkerchief. How did you? I began stuttering. What is it you desire? Asked the old man. Suddenly, a strange feeling swept over me. A feeling of intense euphoria crept up from my toes, flooding my brain. I wish every man who sleeps with my wife would get sick and die a slow, painful death. The words seemed to come out of my mouth as if someone else was saying them. Suddenly, everything began to spin, and before I knew it, I was back in my truck. I reluctantly drove into work after spending the night in a dingy motel. All I wanted to do was punch Big Ed in his fat face, but with my marriage on the rocks, I knew I couldn't afford it. When I arrived, I was surprised to see Mason Bradley wasn't at his station. I didn't give it much thought until I saw Big Ed coming from the bathroom, looking like death warmed up. Hey Ed, you don't look so good. Ed stood there, pale as a ghost, trying to keep the contents of his stomach from ejecting from his mouth. I think it was something I ate, he explained as I took a step back from him. Does this have anything to do with Bradley being out? I asked. Yeah, he was too sick to make it in today. Must be a bug going around. Over the next few days, I watched Big Ed get weaker until there was no sign of him. I had gotten word that Mason Bradley had died, and from what I was told, Big Ed wasn't far behind. Since Big Ed wasn't in, we knocked off early. As I drove home, I stopped at the local gas station to pick up some beers. Phil, the owner, was at the counter looking like he was about to pass out. You all right, Phil? You're looking a bit pale there, buddy. Phil covered his mouth, trying his best not to puke all over the counter. I'm after picking up this bug that's going around. It couldn't be, I thought to myself, as I suddenly remembered the strange encounter I had the other night, the one I was sure was just a strange dream. You look after yourself, Phil, and get yourself to a doctor. Will you give my love to that beautiful wife of yours and tell her I'll drop off her magazines once I feel better, said Phil, before dashing for the bathroom. As I drove into my driveway, I noticed Mrs. Stevens standing outside her house looking distraught. What's wrong, Anne? I asked. It's Mike. They took him to the hospital. Who took him? Mrs. Stevens was too distraught to get her words out. Men in hazmat suits. I felt the familiar feeling of despair rise from the pit of my stomach. Who else got sick? Bob, Tony, from across the road, the guy who delivers the milk. They're dropping like flies. Days went by, and news of men getting sick and dying all over town continued to trickle in. Suddenly, I was hit with the realization that the man I met a few weeks ago wasn't a figment of my imagination. I wrestled with the guilt of everyone dying and the heartbreak of my wife's infidelity. I didn't want people dying, and if this was my fault, I needed to fix it. I got in my truck and began driving the same road as before. I was overwhelmed with thoughts of people dying and the guilt and grief it brought with it. As I drove, I suddenly spotted the old man sitting by the roadside. I slammed on the brakes and jumped from my truck. I ran to the old man before dropping to my knees. Please, I beg you, whatever you have done, you need to take it back. The old man gave me a confused look. But it was what you desired. Why would you want to take it back? I was upset, but I didn't want people to die. Please, it's not what I desire, I cried. The old man put his hand on my shoulder. What is it you truly desire? All I want is for my wife to love me and only me, I begged. Suddenly, I was overcome with that same feeling of euphoria. My world began to spin before I was suddenly back in my truck, and the old man was nowhere to be seen. As I walked in my front door, Susan was standing there waiting for me. She had a look on her face I had never seen before. She ran and threw her arms around me before kissing me passionately. I love you so much, Jack. Can you please forgive me? Of course I forgive you. I always do. My wife's face lit up, and for the first time, I could feel a genuine sense of love from her, a feeling I had always desired. From now on, you're the only man I want and need, she said as she led me upstairs to the bedroom. That night, we made passionate love as if we were the only two people that existed in the world. After we finished, we spent the rest of the night cuddling and planning for a better future together. The following morning, I woke with a splitting headache. As the days passed, I was stuck to the toilet, puking my guts up. As I grew weaker, the terrifying realization of the first wish hit me like a ton of bricks. I write this as I'm in the final throes of death as a warning to others. Be careful what you wish for. I live alone, so who keeps writing messages on my mirror? I turned 18 in 2008, and on the day of my birthday, for reasons I won't bore you with, I packed up my things and moved out. For 4 years, I lived in my car, working as a barista from 6 to 2 and as a line cook from 4 to 10. My plan was to work until I had enough money for my own place and then to either go to college or get a real job. Looking back on it now, I don't know how I did it, but by 22, I'd saved up a decent sum of money and began my hunt for a semi-permanent place of residence. I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and though housing prices weren't as bad as they are now, it was still a pricey county. After months of asking around, I was connected with Anders, an elderly man who was leasing a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house in North Hollywood for far below market rate. The catch, because there's always a catch when it comes to affordable housing, was that the house had been terribly maintained. It had been unoccupied for a year and would need some serious TLC before most people could comfortably reside in it. I, however, had been living out of a car for 4 years. As long as the place had running water, it would be an upgrade for me. I moved into the house in fall 2012. Anders gave me a tour before I got settled. He was a short, joyful old man, well-meaning, but how do I put this? Maybe not the most focused as a result of his age. At one point during the tour, he showed me the bathroom, then the master bedroom, then the bathroom again, then the master bedroom again. He was about to walk into the bathroom for a third time before I gently guided him down the hall. The house itself was livable but weathered. Dim lighting from outdated fixtures cast long shadows over peeling wallpaper. The ceilings in many of the rooms were discolored from past leaks, the faucet in the kitchen sink was broken, the bathtub was badly chipped, and a few of the cabinet handles fell off in my hand. It was a rundown place, located in a bars on the window kind of neighborhood, but still, it was my place. I was smiling ear to ear when Anders gave me the keys. "It's a good house with good bones. You take care of it now," he instructed, which I found ironic. Before he left, he paused in the front doorway, drawing a hand to his chin as he looked behind me into the house. I tried to follow his gaze, but couldn't figure out what he was looking at. "Everything all right?" "Yes. Just that something looks different about that bathroom, though I can't put my finger on what." "Ah, well, it's a good house with good bones. You take care of it now." And with that, he gave me a nod and left me to my unpacking. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed living in a house. I didn't care how run down the place was. Just having an accessible bathroom and a full-size mattress to sleep on made me feel like a king. After I'd spent a few days cleaning the place up, I invited my sister and her fiancé over for dinner. I'm sure it sounds stupid, but my newly acquired ability to host company made me proud. In no time at all, I'd comfortably settled into my new home. That evening, after saying goodbye to my guests, I took a shower. The bathroom lacked a traditional above-the-sink mirror. Instead, it had a wide, full-length mirror mounted on the wall to the left of the vanity. When I exited the shower and stepped up to the glass, raising a hand to wipe away the fog, I noticed something odd. In the condensation right at my eye level was the word, "Hi." I didn't know what to make of it. Somehow, the letters seemed intentional. It was hard to pass off as simply the way the steam had settled. My sister had been in the bathroom just before she left. Maybe she had written the word on the mirror with her fingertip, and the steam had only made the letters visible after my shower. I almost texted her about it, but the message seemed ridiculous when I typed it out. Paranoid, even. I wiped the mirror down and turned in for the night, and soon I forgot about it entirely. The following week, I received a promotion at one of my jobs, and while I was grateful for the additional income, my new position meant longer days. Additionally, I realized that a few of the house repairs were beyond my ability, so I started outsourcing some work to contractors. It was annoying to only have the house to myself at night, but I didn't have another option with my busy schedule. Things were generally progressing smoothly, though every once in a while, in the middle of the night, I would be awoken by a sound that I couldn't quite place. When I next noticed writing on my mirror, I had been living at the house for a month. The second sighting occurred in much the same way as the first. I came back home after work and took a shower. When I pushed back the shower curtain, I looked at the glass and saw, written in the condensation, the words, "Staying long?" Now, I could pass 2 letters off as a coincidence. But 2 words? An entire question? That was no coincidence. Someone had been in my bathroom, and recently. I had contractors in and out of my house all the time, so one of them could have written the message, but why? I got dressed and put a hand on the bathroom doorknob, about to go back into my bedroom, when it occurred to me that whoever had written the message might still be around. I slowly cracked open the door, peering down the dark hallway in one direction, then the other. I listened very carefully, but I heard nothing. I walked around my house, which didn't take long given its size, and looked for anything out of place. All of my doors were locked, all of my windows were shut, and none of my personal items had been disturbed. If someone had broken into my house, they were long gone by the time I looked around. That second message put me on edge for days. I triple-checked that my windows and doors were locked each night. I looked in every potential hiding spot, of which there were few in my little house, after I came home from work and before I went to sleep. And yet, though I was certain that my house was secure, I couldn't shake the sense that something was wrong. A month passed without incident. I had almost started to feel at home in my new lodgings again, until one Friday morning, I awoke just past 3 a.m. I couldn't immediately tell what had woken me. Often, the house settled at night, creaking and groaning in ways that made it sound alive. But in that moment, the house was silent. It was only after I turned my head to the side that I realized my bedroom door, which I was certain I had shut, was wide open. I stared down the hallway, feeling as though I were gazing into a black hole. The darkness was abyssal. I kept waiting for my eyes to adjust, waiting for them to pick out the familiar shapes of my home, but they never did. I couldn't see a thing, so why did I feel like something could see me? Like there was something in the house with me, just feet beyond the threshold to my bedroom, watching, waiting. Somehow, I found the courage to rise from my bed and walk toward the door. When I made it to the handle, I grabbed it and slammed the door shut. I didn't investigate further, didn't so much as stick my head out into the hall for a closer look. My bedroom door didn't have a lock. None of the doors except the bathroom did, so I dragged my bookcase in front of the door. It was a small bookcase, and an intruder could probably ram the door open anyway if they wanted to, but not before the sound alerted me. When morning came and I had to leave the house for work, I genuinely considered exiting through the window. I was almost late by the time I worked up the nerve to look around my house before I left. As always, I found nothing amiss. After work, when I reluctantly returned home for the night, I ate a quick dinner and hopped in the shower. I remember standing in the tub for a long time, mulling over my predicament. I'd heard horror stories about people secretly living in other people's homes. Maybe I'd become a victim of a frog without even knowing, but if that was the case, then where the hell were they? There was nowhere to hide in that tiny house. I'd torn the place apart multiple times by then, checking every cabinet and closet. The inside of the house couldn't be accessed from the crawl space, and the air vents were too small for a person to fit in. Suddenly, I heard a click, so tiny that I'd almost missed it entirely. I tore back the shower curtain, gripping the shampoo bottle like I was about to bludgeon an intruder to death with it. As I'd come to expect, there was no one in the room, but there was a new message on the mirror. This one was bold, the easiest to read of any of the messages I'd received so far. It was 3 words long. I see you, Ha. Some awful amalgam of fear, confusion, and anger made my stomach churn. Ultimately, the latter emotion rose above the rest. I hastily dried off, threw on some clothes, and grabbed my phone from where I'd left it on the bathroom counter. I punched in Anders's number and glared at that damn mirror as I listened to the phone ring again and again. I had started to think it was too late for him to be awake when he suddenly picked up. He started to ask me how I was faring in my new lodgings before I cut him off. I need you to tell me if there's some way that a person could be getting into the house, I said. Every night, I check every window and door. I check every cupboard, closet, and cabinet, and still things are amiss. You need to let me know if there's some entry point that I'm not aware of. Anders didn't seem to entirely understand what I was asking. What? What's getting in? You let me know if you're having rat troubles. My last tenant before you had rat trouble sometimes. Yeah, sure. I've got rats. Besides the doors and the windows, how could they be getting in? Well, there's the vents, of course. And there was a chimney once, though we had it sealed up a good long while ago. And there's also the crawl space, of course, though I'm sure you've already poked around down there. Though I knew the home had a crawl space, I'd never had much reason to investigate it. I had never been able to find the entrance, even after ripping up all the carpeting in the house. Likely, hardwood had been installed over the access door, making it an unlikely point of entry for an intruder. How do I get down to the crawl space? Yes, you should give the crawl space a gander. I barely stopped myself from smashing the phone into the counter. I plan to. Where can I find the entrance? That'll be on the floor of the bathroom closet. I looked around the room. Surely I'd misheard him. Either that, or he was confused again. What? I know, it's an odd place for it, but it's only there because that room didn't always used to be a bathroom. The bathroom doesn't have a closet. Sure it does, just to the left of the vanity. I looked at the mirror. At that long, oversized mirror. I'd always found it odd for a bathroom of that size to have a built-in floor-to-ceiling mirror. What was it that Anders had said when he first visited? That something had looked different about the bathroom? Setting my phone down next to the sink, I stepped up close to the glass. I spent a few moments feeling around the frame, looking for a latch. Then I grabbed a portion of the right side of the frame in two hands. After one hard yank, the mirror swung open like a door, revealing a large walk-in closet. Anders was saying something on the other end of the line, but I was too stunned to answer. There was a square-shaped hole at the back of the closet, which I assumed led down to the crawl space beneath the house. The closet floor was littered with all kinds of trash, filthy sheets, fast food containers, beer cans, and I realized some of my own items. Little things I thought I'd misplaced. A sock, a toothbrush, a comb, and a small framed photograph of me, my sister, and our old family dog. I crouched down to pick up the photo, perched in the doorway as I studied my younger, smiling self. I heard Anders saying my name over the phone. Except, the voice didn't sound much like Anders at all. It was too deep, too clear, too close. When I looked up, a man was peeking out at me from the hole in the floor. He smiled at me, his eyes wide and pupils dilated, his smile so wide it looked painful, and his long hair matted. He was only visible from the neck up, and the harsh lighting made it look like a disembodied head was grinning at me from the back of the closet. Horrified, I rose to my feet and ran. I didn't stop running until I made it to my car, which I promptly drove to my sister's house. The next day, I went to the police station to file a report. An officer met me at the house to check the scene, and I showed him the hidden closet, which indeed had an entrance to the crawl space. My best guess was that the intruder was entering my crawl space through the small door on the side of my house. He had likely been squatting in the house during the year it sat unoccupied, and when he saw it was being prepared for sale, he disguised the closet door to keep a hidden room for himself. Why he decided to stay or why he was leaving me messages, I can't say. From his actions and from what little I saw of him, I think it's safe to assume that he wasn't of sound mind. Unfortunately, the man was never found. For all I know, he's still in that same neighborhood. Hell, he might even be in the same house. I moved across the county afterward and have lived in studio apartments ever since. The thought of living in a big house with all those rooms, corners, and places to hide gives me the creeps. It's not just houses that the incident soured for me, but mirrors as well. These days, when I visit a friend or stay at a hotel, I always have to carefully inspect the bathroom mirrors, shining a light directly into their faces and tapping a finger against the glass. Because the worst part of the whole ordeal was that when I revisited the bathroom with the police officer, I stepped into the old closet, closed the door, and looked into the mirror. Instead of seeing my reflection, I saw the officer's face on the other side of the glass.